So let's talk about making a nighttime critter detector. This is for suburban areas or urban areas where you have a nighttime pest getting into your trash, be it a rodent like a mouse or a rat, or like a possum or a squirrel, or maybe a neighbor's dog or cat. Anything with body heat, really, and probably maybe even something without it. Now this right here, these are a special kind of motion detector, in that they're cheap, which is my kind of motion detector. Okay, screw all the all the really expensive systems. This is a special type known as a driveway alarm or a driveway sensor. It's different than just a basic motion detector. The reason it's different is because it's meant to be a driveway. They're designed so that this can be a much further distance from the alarm. If you just look for a regular motion detector, usually it's an all-in-one unit with the alarm. Now, I don't have to tell you, that's pretty damn pointless when you're trying to covertly know if a critter is somewhere, because last thing what you want to do is put your bait in front of something that's going to scream at it as soon as it comes. Well, on second thought, maybe that will deter it, but that's not the point. I think most animals will quickly learn to get over a doorbell chime. Anyways, so this is the beeper unit, and this is the motion sensor. Now, a few things to note when you're there's a little bit of screwdriver work needed. Well, recommended, not needed. You can use it as is, but you see that little blue light? This blue light is actually going to be like really, really bright, like way late at night. Let me see if I can get away from it for a second, and then the phone up here. Yeah, right. So a couple of things is you want this motion sensor as close to the bait as possible because you don't want any false triggers, right? And because of that, that blue light's gonna like blast a critter like straight in the face. And more times than not, what I've seen, those blue lights end up screwing over the system because right off the bat, it's a skittish animal. Nocturnal animals typically cannot see very well in the red and green color spectrums, but they can always see very well in the blue, right? So that is the absolute wrong color. If it were red, it would be a lot better, but it's not, so it isn't. So a little bit of screwdriver work is required, some basic tools. I got a power drill and a couple of pliers here. I didn't really need these, but these are probably just something you may want to have on hand. I don't know. Working with the screws on these things is easy. They're usually these little bitty teeny tiny screws. Where's my, here we are, right? These itty bitty things, right? And a lot of people think you need like a glasses screwdriver kit to get these, and usually you don't. If you have a set of drill bits, I want to show you this trick. If you have a set of drill bits, you have a number of different sizes of the Phillips heads. And you see this little tiny skinny one, the tiniest one? Most of the time these little tiny screws will actually fit on this. The only time it doesn't is if they're in a really, really deep, narrow hole like this guy is. In which case I had to resort to like a micro tool set. I don't know the official name. Little teeny tiny, super tiny ones, right? But I did this just to show on a standard drill bit set. Usually with tiny screws, they will fit just fine on the tip of this, so long as they're accessible. And in this case, this one, line up the camera here. See right here, this one can actually go on it just fine. It can access it just fine because it's there in the battery. However, these two are deep, so I had to go to something a little more special. But in any case, it's a glasses screwdriver kit. You can get it, or you can just get like a special micro screwdriver set, whatever. They're tiny screws. It's not that complicated. Now, what is complicated, once it's apart, you always want to, damn it. See right here, this is what happens when I try to do anything one-handed and talk and try to sound semi-cool. It does not work out well. So I took this apart, and this is the LED light. And the way that I pulled this out, you have to be careful with these things because they're usually secured some way. In this particular case, this unit, it was sort of glued in there. And so I just took the tip of this small dude with the case open and just gently pushed it out backwards. But once it's out, I just wrapped it in black duct tape. You can also use black electrical tape or anything. You want to make sure that you leave the wires intact. You don't want to break any of the circuitry. You just want to block the light. Be smart. Don't try to cut it off, because chances are if you cut the wires, the whole thing's just not going to work, because it's designed to work with wires intact, right? So anyways, I just wrap it up in duct tape, and then just to be on the safe side, I put it back behind the control board here. This is the sensor. So let me show you, just in case you're not overly familiar with circuits. All right. You don't have to know anything about circuits to know that these control boards are very simple. Look for the star of the show, and that's your sensor, right? So obviously these go to the batteries. This was the light on the front. That leaves this guy. Process of elimination. He's your sensor. So once it's covered in tape, and you just put it back together. Now I have a hot glue gun here, because what I wanted to do, just to be extra safe, so I kind of wanted to seal this guy up just a little bit, since winter is approaching. And I have another technique that I'll show you in just a second, but I really just kind of wanted to have an extra layer, and I didn't want a hole open here for shit to come in, because that's my luck, right? That's really all I'm doing. I got shit luck with these projects sometimes, and so I just try to take a bet against myself, because I will find a way to screw it up. Case in point, this is like my 3rd or 4th sensor set in a year, so I always manage to screw these things up. But that's okay, because they're cheap, and I don't care. Once they're back together, let me show you the actual chime unit. This is a felt pad that normally goes on the bottom of like furniture, like the bottom of chairs and all that. I like these felt pads because they're usually adhesive, and you can adhere it over the speaker. And where this excels more so than tape, if you just tape over the speakers, tape really is a poor insulator of sound. But all of this felt really helps muffle the tone. This thing is loud as shit because it's an alarm, and I have toddlers, so they don't really get along. So this actually helps keep it quiet. It's nice and muffled. I'm going to turn this on, and it's actually going to be on low volume. Right, and so that's going to be the unit that's in the house. So whenever I hear that, I know that something has triggered the motion sensor. Now, these cheap ones, let me tell you what they do and the way these work, because it's very important. They don't actually detect motion. Like you can see right now, it's not really picking it up. What these do, and this is, I'm going to try and make this as simple as possible. They basically, they keep track of how much heat. So infrared is a spectrum of light that comes from heat, right? So whenever you see like the thermal cameras, like from the Terminator, that's measuring infrared light. And so what this thing does, because it's just so cheap, is it basically keeps track of how much infrared background radiation is in a given area. So it's going to basically say, okay, I've got X amount of infrared light. And then if there's a sudden increase or decrease in the amount of infrared light within the heat spectrum, it's going to believe that something warm has come into the area, or the temperature has suddenly changed. Now that means that this thing is somewhat susceptible to sudden bouts of bright sunlight. So if you have it out on a fence and it's a cloudy day and all of a sudden, poof, the clouds split open, then it's going to think that something's there. As you can see, over time, it starts to get more and more sensitive, because, and like I said before, because it records these levels over time, it doesn't look for totals, it looks for spikes and changes in the infrared, or in the amount of infrared light sources, whatever. I can't really, you get the idea, I hope, right? So the longer it stays looking at a given area, the longer that it goes, then the better the average that it gets. And so it's able to detect smaller and smaller changes because it knows that this area doesn't change a whole lot, right? So it eventually kind of sort of stabilizes, and now it's actually just picking me up, doing, you know, not much of anything. Of course, now that I'm trying to do it, it doesn't. There we go, right? So once these guys are stationary, they're fairly decent, but that's just how it works. It's not an actual motion detector, so just to be clear on that. What else? Well, that's really about it. Oh, one more thing. What I do for additional weatherproofing, I promise you I had a good system. Ziploc bag, freezer bags work best. I am really this ghetto. Why? Because I don't want to spend a lot of money on stuff, and sometimes ugly is smart. So I put it in a Ziploc bag, and then I'll smash it down into a corner and end up folding it over real nice and good. And then let me come over here. I'll take something like this, dude. I totally don't even have the free hands right now to do this. But yeah, basically just fold the Ziploc bag over and around like a Christmas gift, of like a really shitty Christmas gift. And then I wrap it up with the packing tape to make sure that it you know, stays put. And of course, make sure that you close the zipper, number one. And number two, you want to tape it so that the plastic on the front is not crinkled. So you don't want something like that. You want this pulled as straight as possible, with as little deformation as possible. So pull it skin tight, and tape it in the back like a good face lift, and you'll be good. This will be fairly weatherproof. And if it turns out not to be, who the hell cares? They're cheap. And that's really about it. So hope you enjoy it. If you're having trouble with night pests and you want to know when something's out there, you can set this up, put some cat food out or whatever other bait you want. If you have a live trap and you want to know when something's in the trap, you could actually just put one of these sensors in there. I got a 2 sensor set. Unfortunately, they both alarm the same because it is too damn cheap to differentiate. Don't really care. Yeah, that's about it. Let you know when there's a critter out, and then you can run out there and say, get on out, you shoo. And they shall shoo. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you on another video.